You know, I make a lot of videos about investment banking, and so today I thought, why not just dress up like a banker? Don't mind the models in the back, by the way. I was just, crushing some models in order to get in the zone for this video. I'm not saying I could do method acting, but Alright guys, hope you enjoyed that little intro. If you're new to the channel, my name is Ben, and I used to work as an investment banking analyst at JP Morgan for a little less than 3 years, where I worked on transactions like IPOs, all the way to $6 billion M&A transactions. And today, I want to share with all of you guys the good, the bad, and the ugly aspects of investment banking. First up, let's start with the good stuff. I'll be going over 3 good, 3 bad, and 3 ugly aspects of investment banking. And starting off with the first good one, it's that you have a clear path either to make a ton of money or exit to an interesting job. In the United States, you need to be making about $600,000 a year in order to be a top 1% earner. And who's going to pay you that kind of money? That's right, an investment bank. A top 10 bank, by the time you're a vice president, will have you be earning around that kind of money. And so if you start straight out of undergrad as an analyst and go into your VP years, that usually takes around 6 or 7 years, and you'll be a top 1% earner. You can also join a private equity firm or a hedge fund and make similar amounts of money. Or you can also exit out to a more interesting job that has a better work-life balance, like corporate development, strategy and ops, be a product manager. And these kind of jobs also have really good compensation, but don't work you as hard as investment banking. I'll keep this short because I did make 2 videos about compensation for investment banking and exit opportunities, so feel free to check those videos out if you're interested. The second good thing about investment banking is that you'll always be able to look back and say, well, at least this isn't worse than banking. Of course, that's just my sarcastic way of saying that banking really helps you build a lot of resilience and discipline. You need to have persistence in order to succeed in anything that you do, regardless of what field you're in. And personally, having gone through entrepreneurship over the past 5 years, I would say entrepreneurship has its own challenges, can be a lot harder in a lot of ways, but I'm really glad that I did banking immediately out of college because it set a really strong foundation of being able to have a lot of horsepower, working those long hours and building that resilience. And everyone knows about the technical skills that you gain from investment banking and PowerPoint, but I feel like this persistence and resilience that you gain is a bit undervalued. The third and good thing about investment banking is that you're working on transactions that are the biggest milestones in any company's histories. When a company is doing M&A, so buying another company or selling itself or doing an initial public offering, these are huge milestones in every company's history. So this means that you're working with top-level management, CEOs, CFOs, as a young 22-year-old if you're an analyst, or maybe a 27-year-old if you're an associate out of MBA. And you're also working on the very, very lean deal teams. Usually there's just one analyst, one associate, one VP for each deal. And so you just have a ton of responsibility. So for example, when I was an analyst, I was working on the financial model and the PowerPoint that was going to determine whether or not this $6 billion acquisition was going to happen. And so ton of responsibility. It's a lot of pressure, but I think you just really can't get this in most other jobs. Now, with that said, I do have a small confession to make, which is that for the first 6 months of my job as an analyst, I did not touch a proper financial model. And a large reason for that is because I didn't come in super prepared knowing how to build financial models, which I think nowadays in this day and age, you don't really have an excuse not to be able to do because there are so many resources out there. And one that I highly recommend is today's sponsor for the video, Wall Street Prep. Wall Street Prep offers financial modeling courses so you can be ready not just for interviews, but your job on the desk as a banker. And what I really like is that they have you dig into financial statements and build models using real numbers, just like what I used to do at JP Morgan. They offer a ton of great courses, but the 2 I particularly recommend are the accounting course if you don't have any prior accounting knowledge, and the premium modeling package, which has been taken by over 100,000 students and goes over all the key valuation concepts I learned in banking, like DCFs, comps, accretion dilution, and LBOs. Wall Street Prep has been around since 2004, and they help train employees at all of the top banks and institutions in the world, including at Wharton, where my classmates have been attending live instructor sessions. So if you're interested in banking, don't be like me. Before you actually get to the desk as a banker, be sure to brush up on skills for financial modeling. And if any of this is of interest to you, be sure to use my code RARELIQUID to get 20% off of any course. All right, with that said, let's now go into the bad truths of investment banking. First up, you think banking sounds glamorous? The truth is, you're at the mercy of your clients. From the outside looking in, it could seem like bankers are hotshots who are calling all the shots, but in actuality, banking is a client services industry. And so you might have a very high performing deal team who can get shit done. But if you have a client who is just an absolute nightmare, has incompetent management, or their financials are a mess, you just have to deal with it.
Deal with this shit on your own.
There are two personal experiences that I had that really kind of represent this. And so the first is just this notoriously bad client that I had that would always update their financial models really last minute. And I remember so many Friday afternoons where they would send us new numbers, meaning that it would just blow up my weekend because I would have to update the new financial models and correct all of the presentation pages that are related to the numbers, which were always a ton. And then second, when you're an analyst, you look at your managing directors or your head of investment banking and think, wow, they're so experienced, they're so alpha, but then you put them into a call with a very, very important client that they really care about, and they're the ones sucking up to the client all the time. And so they're not really the alphas, they're really at the client's mercy.
You know it's more important to me to earn client fees than respected.
The second bad thing about investment banking is that you're always on call like a doctor, except you're not saving patients. You're probably going to have to work on Excel or PowerPoint, and you're always glued to your phone. Communication in investment banking is pretty insane in the sense that you're expected usually to reply to emails within a matter of a few minutes of receiving them, especially if you're on a live deal, regardless if it's the weekday or weekend. And so I remember when I left investment banking and quit, the thing I remember most about that day is just deleting the work email off my account and just walking around not having to check my phone every few minutes, and how amazing that felt. With that said, I do also kind of have to credit banking a little bit in the sense that because you're so used to communicating quickly, nowadays I don't, reply within a few minutes, but I do make sure that I reply pretty quickly to important messages and emails, and I think that's just a good habit in business. The third bad truth of investment banking is that deals die often. There have been so many times when I've been working on a presentation or a model for weeks, and all of a sudden, my managing director comes by and says, pencils down, we're no longer working on the transaction. The client decided to not do it for XYZ reason. Regardless if it's an M&A transaction, an IPO, or a debt offering, the client, for whatever reason, or it could be because of the market, or for whatever reason that the client decides, they can decide not to pursue the transaction anymore. And that means all the work that you poured into it probably will kind of amount to nothing unless the transaction comes back alive again. Before moving forward, I wanted to let you guys know that I'm building out my own how to get into investment banking course that you can sign up early in order to get a 50% discount when it launches. And I'm going to be covering everything from resumes, cover letters, behaviorals, technicals, recruiting, and industry overview, everything that you need to know. So feel free to sign up early if you're interested. Okay, so with that said, let's go now into what you probably clicked for, which are the ugly truths of investment banking. The first is that in investment banking, valuation is often an exercise of looking backward rather than looking forward. Financial modeling is seen as something so important in investment banking, and it really is. But the thing is that a lot of the times the client already kind of has in mind a number that they want to either sell at or buy the company at. And so a lot of times you'll build the model as an analyst and you'll kind of back into whatever the client wants. And so you'll juice up numbers here and there in the model in order for the company to be justified to sell at, let's say, $1 billion. Or if the bidding process is happening and your buyer wants to be more competitive, then you'll juice up the numbers so you can justify a higher valuation for the target. Now, still, the financial modeling skills you gain in investment banking are very valuable, but this is kind of the reason why a lot of bankers actually leave to private equity or hedge funds, because in those industries, you actually have to do an independent valuation of whatever asset or company you're looking into. And you better be right about your modeling, because if not, you're going to make a bad investment and lose a ton of money. The second ugly truth is that there's a misalignment of incentives between banks and clients. Senior bankers are paid to bring in large deals that bring the banks a lot of fees, while companies are trying to make the proper acquisitions or debt and equity offerings that allow them to grow sustainably in the long term. The truth is, there are a lot of transactions that banks work on that probably shouldn't happen. So, for example, over 50%, so the majority of M&A transactions are often in the long run seen as unsuccessful for reasons like overpayment, culture clashes, and poor synergies and integration. And this isn't always the bank's fault, because ultimately the client often is responsible for a lot of these things and is making the final decision on any of these transactions, right? But with that said, bankers are constantly pitching to clients, hey, you should do this equity offering or purchase this company, try to sell yourself, etc., when it may not always be the best decision, but the senior banker wants to make sure they're doing a lot of transactions so they can get a higher bonus at the end of the year.
Listen, I'm here, little buddy, to make some money.
I do want to add one caveat to this though, which is that if you're a really senior banker, client relationships are ultimately what's most important. And you don't want to risk your reputation because of one deal. So then a lot of times the best senior bankers will know this and make sure that they're trying to bring the best deals and transactions to their clients in order to not really screw them over in the long run. The third ugly truth of investment banking is that banking entails a very political environment. And if you don't really fit in, then you're going to be pushed out.
Politics, right? What are you going to do?
Now, this kind of may be true at a lot of different companies, especially if they're large, but I guess at a small company, the organization is usually pretty flat. The bad thing about investment banking, though, is that it's highly political. And if you're not really fitting in, then you have to work 70 to 100 hours a week if you're an analyst or an associate in that environment, which is not the same versus other companies where you might be working a normal 40-hour-a-week job. To share with you guys some personal examples, I remember there was an analyst who didn't really fit into our group and so was constantly being given really, really crap deals and projects and presentations to work on. And so eventually, that analyst just left because they were like, I'm not working on any live deals, not really learning a lot. There was also another analyst on my team who I would say was a really good analyst, did the work really well, was good at modeling, put in a lot of hours, but because he had a personality clash with another associate, during the performance review, he got crushed. And so he got a really, really poor bonus. And there were other analysts who were not as good, but because they're really good at just kind of schmoozing with the senior bankers and etc., they got like a higher performance rating and higher bonus. All right, so that was the good, the bad, and the ugly aspects of investment banking, but I don't want to end the video on too much of a negative note. So I do want to add that it's important to be aware that any work environment you go into, there's always going to be the good, the bad, and the ugly for whatever work that you do. So it's not just that banking is a terrible kind of work environment. If I could go back after undergrad, I would still do investment banking because of what I learned. So just wanted to end with that, and also wanted to let you guys know that in the next screen, you're going to see a video about a week in the life of an investment banking analyst in case you're interested. With that said, thank you all so much for watching. Hope to catch you all in the next video. Thanks so much and peace out.